Welcome to CR Classics, our newest series breaking down some of the best matches in tennis history. And look, there are so many matches that go on a year-by-year basis in the tennis world. It's hard to keep track of all of them, and that's why what we are going to be doing in this new series, looking at some of those best matches. Obviously, some of them will be Grand Slam-centric, the finals, the semifinals that have captivated both the hearts and imaginations of so many tennis fans across the globe. But there are also different matches, more impactful for different reasons that we're going to discuss throughout this series. We're also so thrilled to have super producer Daniel Westhoff getting to flex his muscles now, turning these into YouTube videos so we can share the highlights that we're discussing, some of the fun commentator sound effects, and all the various things that make a Cracked Racquets product so great in video form. So what you guys can go do, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find that just at the bottom of your screen. Give that a little clickety-clack, and you're not going to miss any of the action. You can also check out Overserved, our newest series, poking fun at all the unintentional comedy that goes on tour on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. That being said, let's kick it off with our first CR Classic, the 2011 French Open Semifinal between Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic. Joining me for today's new series, as he so frequently does, you know him as a former Denison men's tennis superstar, one of the co-hosts of our Mini Break podcast, a man I affectionately refer to as James Foster McDonald, and a guy whose 8-day tenure as a high school tennis head coach as successful as any 8 guys out there. Jamie, hey, great shot. How you doing today?
Co-state champion, my first season. It's an honor. Hey, the trajectory was there. It was going to be a good season, no doubt about it. But it hasn't officially been axed, but it is certainly looking that way. So I might have to look for a different coaching position. But we'll breeze over that one. It'll be good.
Yeah, no. I feel like the exercise we are doing today is something you would almost certainly have your players be doing in their spare time as well. Before we break down today's CR Classic match, let's set the scene. We're not going to, no spoilers, we won't get into the scoreline right away. But again, this Djokovic-Federer match, this was the peak of the Big Four era this season. You look at the results for these guys heading into this one. Let's start with Novak Djokovic, because this is the obvious takeaway. And the first joke I have written in my outline, Jamie, his 2011 season has its own Wikipedia page. Do you know how special of a season it has to be for you to have your own Wikipedia page, your own sort of outline on each of your accomplishments? It speaks to just how good Novak Djokovic was to start 2011. And for those of you who forget, he entered this semifinal match on a 42-match win streak. He was technically 41, but I'm counting a withdrawal, so 42 results for him. And it wasn't just are the other guys, the other Big Four players losing? Is he just coasting to these results? No. 3-0 against Federer, 4-0 against Rafa, 2-0 against Murray. Wins over guys like Berdych, like Del Potro, like Gasquet, Ferrer, Soderling, who were all in the primes of their careers as well. And then the kicker above all else, Jamie, he beat Nadal twice on clay in the build-up to this event. This was, any argument that this was his best season, it's because he started off on fire.
Oh, absolutely. And, great job setting the scene there, because it's ridiculous. It was all aboard the Djokovic train. This guy was running the ATP tour, and, he's being talked about the most, and rightfully so. Just mentioned some of the results he put up, especially anytime you're beating Nadal multiple times on clay. We're headed into Roland Garros. There's a ton of expectation that comes with Novak Djokovic, but also deservedly so. The guy was on fire. That's what made this such a special clash.
Yeah, and I do remember some of the storylines heading into that one was Nadal was still the number 1 seed. And, despite as successful as Djokovic was to start his 2011, he wasn't the top-ranked player in the world. He won't ascend to number 1 in the rankings ever in his career until later on in this 2011 season. And you look at the flip side, though, of this, for Roger Federer, and this is where things get really crazy, right, Jamie? Because let's be clear, it's 2020. He now enters with 20 Grand Slams this season, and yeah, he's been a little bit banged up. He's, 38, 39 years old at this point of his career. But you scale the clock all the way back to 2011. After Federer lost to Djokovic at the 2011 Australian Open, it was the first time since July 2003 that Federer didn't hold any of the 4 major titles. And that's just crazy for me to think about, because you do remember that was probably the first time, and Federer was on the precipice of turning 30. And, jokes on us for thinking, 30 years old, he's washed. But it is crazy going into this one for Federer. Yes, he wasn't holding any of the Grand Slam titles. Djokovic had beaten Federer 3 times already in the 2011 season, straight sets in the Australian Open semifinal, straight sets in the Dubai final, and then a 3-set win for him at the Indian Wells semifinals. And then you remember that the last time these two played in a major was that 2010 US Open semifinal, where Djokovic fought off 2 match points and ended up coming back to beat Roger. So heading into this match, Djokovic was and again, it's easy for us to say this now in retrospect, but I think the facts prove it, the circumstances prove it. Djokovic, for the first time, was the prohibitive favorite against Roger Federer.
Yeah, and another piece you didn't quite touch, but that we will certainly get to, and is a theme that flows through this match, is that Fed didn't like that. He wasn't very happy with Djokovic. He was quite annoyed, to say the least. And you and I will certainly mark different points in the during the match where that's like incredibly evident at the end. But that's just another dynamic at play here too, right? You mentioned the match points saved. You mentioned the wins over Federer. Federer's not happy, and it shows in this.
Yeah, and you look at it, Federer's clay portion of the year had not been that great through that point. He lost quarterfinals in Monte Carlo. He lost 3rd round in Rome, and then in Madrid he ended up making the semifinals, but lost that match as well. So certainly it was Rafa or Djokovic's to lose, and that was the final all of us were anticipating heading into the tournament, but then they actually started the play. So we've set the scene to get into the match. Now we want to let you know who these players beat to get here. For Novak Djokovic, he got to the semifinals fairly comfortably, only dropped 1 set along the way. That was a 3rd round match against Del Potro. Straight sets, 4th round over Gasquet, and actually got a walkover over Fabio Fognini in the quarterfinals, which makes you think maybe he was too well rested. Maybe his rhythm was thrown off, and that's a crazy thing to say, but that's one of the things that you think about, certainly given the start he had. But for Federer, he came out with something to prove. And straight set wins for him up until the semifinal. He had not dropped a set. He beat Stan in the 4th round, which is less impressive in 2011 than it is now. But still, that's a good win for him. And then he beat Monfils in straight sets. That was a really good win in 2011. And, for Roger Federer, I'm sure going into that semifinal, he still, I think, was 14-5 against Djokovic in their career head-to-head. So certainly the belief was there for him. You also look in terms of 2006 through 2009, he went finals, victory in 2009 at the French Open, lost in the quarterfinals in 2010 to Soderling, but not a bad loss by any stretch of the imagination. So for him, he's never going to lack confidence going into this one. And now the fun begins. Let's break down this match. The first thing right off the bat that you have to mention in this match, Roger Federer comes out hot. And he goes up love 40 in that first game, ends up breaking Djokovic for 1-love, and hits, I think it was the love 15 point, where he smacks a forehand down the line, Jamie, and it's just so clear from the get-go, as you mentioned, he came out to play.
And he's fired up. You could tell from the first couple of points in particular in that first game. He's setting the tone. And then both of them, within the first couple of games are really setting the tone for what kind of match this is going to be. And ultimately what that is just a sheer battle. Yeah, certainly at the beginning, Federer was out there to prove the fact that you're going to go to my forehand, I'm going to slap it for a winner and make you pay.
Go further on in the set, as you mentioned, to Djokovic's credit, because that's a slap in the face. No one in 2011 was coming out and breaking Djokovic at in a love 40 lead and then breaking him, but Djokovic immediately responds, gets the break back at 15-40. They then play a 5-deuce game. at 1-1. And just, I mean, the first 20, 25 minutes of this match, there's no chaser. Straight shots, right? It's like, let's go. Let's do this thing. Djokovic hits a couple of just ridiculous volleys. The drop volley he hit, I think, on deuce number 4, or maybe it was the first deuce where he hits this just low backhand drop volley, and then I think it's deuce 5 where he hits the over the shoulder, and I'm doing this on camera. I guess there will be a video component, so some of you may be able to see this if you go on YouTube. It was off to the races. It's just a typical French Open crowd. They are rowdy, and I will also say this, heavily partisan towards Fed.
In that sort of sense, like dynamic, not surprised that it's pro-Fed and sort of anti-Djokovic, because we've seen that tons and tons of times over their career.
After getting punched in the face to start things out, Djokovic comes out swinging, and I thought in the first set in particular, it was weird. He played a lot to the Federer forehand, and there's something to be said about, the obvious thing when you're playing Roger Federer, pick on the slice backhand, serve to that side, and, set everything up and go through that side. But that's not what Djokovic was doing. He was clearly just playing, get you outside of the court, get you to the outer thirds, open up as much space as I can for myself. I mean, it's clay court tennis, so there's some, wiseness in that. It's wise to employ that strategy as well, but 5-4, that's where things get interesting in this set, right? Djokovic ends up racing out to a 15-40 lead, and I think one of the themes we are going to see, and this is something if you haven't seen 2011 Roger Federer, if you don't remember what that feels like, because they keep winning, right? There's no need to go back and look at old Federer wins because he's still doing well now. But his willingness to grind and just his willingness to step forward, his willingness, his physicality, all of these different things, and then ultimately just his first serve, he was just a different beast. Roger was making first serves, and even though Novak Djokovic, who I think we would both say greatest returner of all time, there was nothing he could do.
I mean, look, his serve was just phenomenal in this match, and really that's what kept him in it. And a lot of times, you talk about the different sets that Djokovic could have and perhaps should have won looking back on it, and what's sort of the main reason he didn't is because Fed was able to get himself out of trouble on his service games, right? You mentioned this 4-5 game in particular. He's down serving 15-40. He's leaning on his serve, the Federer staple. That's what's going to keep him in this match, and ultimately that's what gets him through. And so it's interesting to see. Look, the effectiveness of Federer's serve, it's something that's still talked about, in 2020. But the way he's able to pair it with the other pieces of his game, the movement, the physicality, just the athleticism that sometimes we don't get to see enough of these days, it just truly exceptional.
As we mentioned, 15-40, Djokovic has 2 set points. Federer goes with a big serve +1 forehand, which he hits behind Djokovic, and then on the next one, just big serve down the tee to fight off those 2 set points. A couple of serve +1 forehands later, it's 5-all. And I will say this, I think it was at that deuce point at 5-all, Federer actually goes with a drop shot, and Djokovic starts to get a little bit cute, right? And that was one of my takeaways from this first set as well, is he was just way too content playing two. And this, look, if I was 42-0, I wouldn't be wearing a shirt at any time of the day, just period. I'd be that confident at all times. But, you just talk about, again, it's subjective. But the vitriol between these two, it was like, you think you're going to beat me, Novak? No, my friend. I'm Roger freaking Federer. Watch what I'm capable of. And so Federer, the come on he lets out to hold for that tiebreaker, Jamie. Again, let's get into this now. They might be more friendly now. In fact, one could even argue they might be friends now. They weren't in 2011. They just weren't. You can't watch Federer's body language and say he was.
Yeah, and this is also, look, you're looking at somebody who's maybe perhaps a little nastier on court than he needs to be. And there are people who I would consider friends who, I would get very intense on the court with. But this, you could feel it. You could feel it. You could feel that he did not like this little, Novak Djokovic punk on the other side of the net. Djokovic was doing different things that have made him mad, that have made Federer mad throughout the match, and then just also in their head-to-heads. The intensity with which Federer played, the come-ons and focus, celebrations and fist pumps that we see later in the match. It all points to this fact. And it made for an even better match because there was so much animosity and tension between these two 2. It really just made one another push that much harder because they both wanted this so badly.
So it's 6-all, right? And they go to the breaker, and Federer did race out to a 4-2 mini break lead. Djokovic ends up unloading on a cross-court forehand to get us back to 3-4, and then back-to-back shanks from Federer. He's up 5-4 on serve. Then a couple of unforced errors from Djokovic, and then, so it's on serve. Federer wins the point, so it's 5-6. Djokovic serving. He hits a great first serve, and he has a backhand that I thought he could have approached on, Jamie, but this is something we're going to see from Djokovic throughout this match. He was just afraid to come to the net, and that's a testament to, in my opinion, how well Roger Federer was moving in that match, just how determined. There were a lot of sliced backhands from Federer that I thought, okay, had Djokovic moved into the shot before, cut that one off, he would have made Federer have to hit a really tough pass. And sure, Federer's capable of making those passes, but I thought Djokovic was too hesitant, too passive. Maybe it speaks to the moment. It speaks to the fact when the crowd's in your head, you just want to prove them wrong. You don't want to give them a reason to blow up as they would for a Federer on the run passing shot. And ultimately, it's Federer who gets the win after Djokovic hits an unforced error on the forehand, and he lets out a roar. Let me tell you, 7-6, he takes that first set. Last question on this set, Jamie. Do you think the right player won it?
Point to point, probably Djokovic, but the problem is, in the big opportunity points, he didn't seize them, right? And credit to Federer because he served himself out of trouble multiple times, right? That's what we've come to expect. But Djokovic has the opportunities to take this set for sure. Ultimately, you take that away. Djokovic does the right things. For me, it's more about Federer getting out of, bad situations as opposed to Djokovic, giving it to Federer.
Early on in this match, it seemed like both guys were frustrated with the court surface. It seemed slippery out there, and there were a bunch of bad bounces, and it did feel like they both needed a second to get acclimated to the moment. But some of the gems in this one, and I think it was Brett Haber who was the main guy on the call who was doing the play-by-play, and then for color was our girl MC Mary Carrillo, as well as John McEnroe. Djokovic gets that break for 4-2. That's why he's in the best in the world. That return of serve, just like that, he's up 4-2. And it's true. That's what it felt like when Novak took that early lead. But then Johnny Mac, with I think one of the best, maybe his best piece of advice ever, he says, to me, it's a more important set for Federer to win, to somehow pull out. Because if you go down 1-0 to Novak Djokovic in 2011, at that point, you're just staring down the barrel of, oh my God, I'm going to have to grind him out for 2.5 more hours. Like, that's the hardest thing you can do in tennis, right? And so I thought he nailed that one. And then the last one, who again, I think it was Brett Haber, who was the main guy on the play-by-play call, who goes, just winning a set from Djokovic takes that effort. And he was right. It took every ounce of Federer's skill to win that first set, Jamie.
The level of play here, insane. Just ridiculous. We talked about the Djokovic unforced error to ultimately end the set, but that doesn't, what we've done doesn't really do justice to the level of play that we saw. This was incredible from both these guys. They are absolutely cracking the ball. You talk about Federer and Djokovic both now. Yeah, maybe, particularly in the Federer camp, say, oh yeah, they talk about who would beat who, right? The 2019-2020 Federer or like the 2011 one. You can make all these, sort of comments about experience, things you've learned on the tour, how to play matches, etc. Pure strokes wise, it is not even, and it takes, fully watching a match like this a couple of times to go back and realize just how good this guy was, and together how good they both were. They were absolutely cranking the ball, and the movement was exceptional on both sides of the court. That's my biggest takeaway from this match as a whole. Who won it? Who lost it? 5 sets, 4 sets, 3 sets. The level of tennis in this match was absurd.
After a seesawing first set that saw Roger Federer take a 7-5 first set breaker, let's get into set number 2. Starting out set number 2, and this is a set, Roger ends up taking 6-3. Djokovic had a break chance right from the get-go. He gets right there. I think it was 30-40, but Federer hits an ace, and then a couple of other big serves. And as you mentioned, that's the recurring theme, is Federer just routinely finding aces, or routinely finding big first serves that end up being unreturnable to take leads. He holds at Djokovic holds at 15 for 1-all, but then it's a love hold for Federer 2-1, and then Federer does his thing, right? It's Federer races out to a 15-40 lead because you can just tell Djokovic starting to sort of lose it, and he starts to say, Mary Carrillo makes a comment there. He points out like Djokovic just looks down. Djokovic is down right now.
Djokovic is down.
I mean, Federer just there was a bump return from from Federer just to get the point back in play, and you just forget because he's obviously still very good at it, but Federer just runs around and just unloads on an inside-out forehand, and then that sets up the inside-in, and you're just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, if Djokovic can't track that ball down, who can?
Yeah, nobody can is the answer. And Federer, look, that's what he was out to say. I mean, that's what he was, out to prove in this match. You mentioned that opening game. I mean, this really set the tone for me because, this is a whole different set if Djokovic converts that break in the first game. You're completely switching the momentum. You're saying, okay, you know what? I gave up that tie break. Probably should have won the set, but we're getting right back and I've got this break. But instead, like you said, and like I mentioned before, Federer serves his way out of trouble, gets himself on the sort of straight and narrow, and then set 2's off to the races.
Yeah, and so again for Federer, big serving 40-15 hold for 4-1, a lazy start from Djokovic, whatever, love 30, but he ends up holding 4-2. Federer easy service game for 5-2. Djokovic then fights off 5 set points in that 2-5 service game. Federer hits this incredible on-the-run forehand to set up a triple set point opportunity from himself, for himself. But Djokovic then starts going into the body. He starts jamming him, and I think it was in that moment where he made the switch and he said, "Okay, you know what? Serving to the forehand, serving out wide on the deuce side, it's just not going to work for me. I can't do this anymore. Roger's playing too well today," and there is something to keeping Roger honest, to saying, "Hey, I'm not afraid of your forehand," but on this day, he had to be afraid of his forehand, and you can just tell because then you get into this 5-3 game, and Roger races out with an unreturnable serve, a serve +1, and a volley for 30 love. And then Djokovic starts to do his thing, right? He starts to grind him down. He starts to extend points. He actually gets to 30-40. But then, Roger, another big first serve. And initially, it was called out. And it's really funny because there's a moment where they sort of both, Djokovic looks at it, the line judge looks at it, and they're like, yeah, that wasn't out. And so they end up giving it to Federer, deuce point up. And then Federer just does his thing. 2 more big first serves, a smart forehand down the line, and it's 6-3 Federer, and he lets out a roar. And at that point, Roger Federer had never lost a match, being up 2 sets to love. And I think even McEnroe, I think even Mary Carrillo, just all of us started to think, because of just how well he was playing, he was hitting through every backhand, right? There was no slice. He was going after every ball, trying to track everything down. Nowadays, you see Federer throw away points, right? Because he's old. He's 38, 39 years old. You just can't do that. But he was not doing that in this French Open. I thought he decisively took this 6-3 second set.
Yeah, and look, it probably should have been 6-2, if we're being honest. He had the chances to make it 6-2. A couple things. First of all, this match could be completely different if he doesn't hit that ace on breakpoint, but he does. Once again, showing the theme of serving when he's in trouble. I think one thing to note as well, he did hit through his backhand really well, Federer. He also used the slice in an intelligent way, I would say. He wasn't just slicing to slice. He would slice and then set up his forehand to absolutely send a rocket at the other side. So he still did that. Of course, you're never going to take the slice out of Federer's game. Fed takes it 6-3. The only thing I'll note, and just because I think it's important for the flow of the match, is Djokovic's idea of going to the forehand. Yeah, you mentioned maybe the idea of trying to prove something there. To me, it's also more strategic in the fact that he's trying to go to the forehand so that he can open up attacking to the backhand, right? That's something that has to be said. But yeah, you're right. He started doing that, particularly on the deuce side, serving out wide, and Fed was just all over it to the point where Djokovic couldn't capitalize and then attack back to Federer's backhand. And he finally was like, okay, I can't do this, right? Because Fed's getting such a clean look on his forehand that I'm not even getting the chance to open up the court.
Roger Federer continued his brilliance into set number 2 and took it 6-3. That meant, once again, he took a 2-sets-to-love lead, and at this point of his career, he had never blown a 2-sets-to-love lead at a major. But given that he was undefeated, we all know Novak Djokovic had a little bit left in the tank. Let's get into set number 3. At the start of the third set, Djokovic just locks in on the Federer backhand, and Federer gets that opening game to deuce, but Djokovic extends a bunch of rallies, holds for 1-0. He then races out to a 15-40 lead in the Federer service game, and on the 30-40 point, I think it's a 16-ball rally, it's a 12-ball rally, not including the serve and the return. Including the serve and return, 8 of the 10 shots Djokovic hit, so I guess double it, if Djokovic is hitting 10 shots, it's a 20-ball rally. 8 of Djokovic's 10 shots targeted the Federer backhand. He locked in. He said, okay, this is how I'm winning this match. I have to draw slices from you. I have to make it as physical as possible. And that he broke for the 2-love lead. Again, I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking about this because I'm just thinking about the level. And, I happened to just watch these highlights again today. And he just enters that zone, right? That was the 2010 U.S. Open semifinal was the preview, but this is the Djokovic zone when you always ask yourself, and earlier this season when he fought off match points against Monfils, you're like, how does he summon that? How does he just get to that point where he goes to brick wall mode, where he's like, you know what, I'm not going to miss anymore. It was matches like these where you saw it for the first time, and you just thought to yourself, okay, this guy's special.
Yeah, look, and when we talk about Novak Djokovic's strategy in this one, obviously he understood how to win on clay. I mean, the guy was looking just so good, but Federer in this day was just a different beast, and so you could tell. And you look at it in set 3, and man, a lot of times it worked. Djokovic did a great job in set 3 of shifting his game a little bit. You talk about the dip in set 2. At times almost looked like he was tanking. Even McEnroe said that. Set 3, certainly not that way. I will say, though, this match is completely different if Fed gets that break in game 1 because it's close. He gets it to deuce. Once Djokovic gets that under his belt, gets the 1-0 hold, you can see a little bit more comfort set in. He's able to just neutralize points and then hammer the backhand. And then from there, he's confident throughout the rest of the set.
Yeah, a couple of pivotal moments, and this first one gets back to our fact of, do these guys like each other? Well, it's 30-all.
Yep.
Federer hits a serve +1 and a couple of forehands around the court, but he mistakenly tries to go behind Djokovic with a forehand approach, and Djokovic just unloads a forehand right at his body. And, Federer gets his racket on it, but shanks it wide. And, in fact, again, we have the McEnroe clip here of him saying, I think he goes, wow, that was interesting.
Wow, that was interesting.
But it speaks to the fact that Djokovic locked in. You're right, the belief, it was there. And, yeah, Federer ended up holding for 3-1. And it's funny because he hits an ace on the very next point to save a break point. He's kind of like, again, sorry for the choice language, but he's kind of like, you, Novak. Like, you think you're going to hit at me? You just woke the sleeping dragon again. Mistake. But this set was just... I think Federer, once he went down that break, he was kind of like, okay, I got to pick my spots because I definitely can't hang with Djokovic for 6 hours. No one can, especially 2011 Djokovic. He's the elastic man. Djokovic holds at love for 6-3, and he seals it with an ace down the tee, which was one of those, I'd been picking on your backhand so long, let me just keep you honest here. Let me hit that ace to get the set. But this set was all about Novak Djokovic locking in, and it was fascinating to me. The crowd went silent. Like, I think they were excited to see more tennis, but that was where even the crowd was like, uh-oh, like, is it about to be Novak time? And it really almost was.
Yeah, it almost was. I do want to go back to that, 0-3 all point because I think, it's only one. Man, just emotionally, this was a big one. Federer is at the ends list, but Djokovic can go anywhere with this ball pretty much. And he rocks one 100 miles an hour right at his body. Nothing we can do this justice. You have to see how hard he hits this ball and just the setup for it. It is very clear what he's doing. And, it's a moment where Federer's like, that's how you want to play this, dude? Let's go. That's what it is. And so maybe Djokovic plays it incorrectly here, by, like you say, angering the beast even further. But I mean, it is exactly what he did. And so I think in the back of his mind, Federer for the rest of the match held on to that and was like, "Are you kidding me? This prick? Like, let's go." And so you mentioned, Djokovic is able to hold on to the break that he established. It's done in set 3, but come set 4, it's a different story.
The greatest champions never go down without a fight, so it came as no surprise that Novak Djokovic took set number 3, 6-3. The question was, could he extend the match to the 5th, or was Roger Federer going to pull out just a little bit more greatness and close this one out in set number 4? Getting into that 4th set, just the level of play at the start of it, because you're right, Federer towards the end of the 3rd was kind of like, all right, I think I have to conserve. Like, I don't think I'm going to get this one. You can just tell from the way he's playing. It's the only time in the entire match where maybe he let a ball go by. Maybe he was slicing the backhand a little bit more, and I think at one point they point out and say, Federer does look a little bit tired, and McEnroe, even at the end, makes his prediction. Westhoff, you can cut the clip in here where he talks about how, I'll quote him here. He says, and this match will not finish, in my opinion.
Yep.
And
this match will not finish, in my opinion.
It shows they felt it in the booth, and we felt it as the fans. And then again, you get through that 3rd set, just routine holds up until 3-all in the 4th. And then you start to get to where we're at in, that 4-3 game. Federer, there's this point, it's 30-love. Federer's up. He gets extended outside the deuce alley on a Djokovic forehand. Djokovic goes behind him again. Federer has to change direction. He sort of loses his footing, scrambles and hits a slice. It's really impressive stuff that he even got to that ball. And then Djokovic finally approaches to the backhand and moves forward, and Federer just, unloads an on-the-run one-handed backhand.
Standing ovation, please.
That's Grandpa? That's Grandpa. That is...
And that led the commentator to say, that's Grandpa. But it did feel like, again, they referred to an almost 30-year-old Fed as Grandpa. With what we know now, that's laughable. But if, Jamie, that shot epitomizes Federer is just like, nope, it's on. You think I'm going to drop off? No chance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we've talked about the level of play, but that right there, especially so deep into a match that had already been so grueling. I mean, Fed's here to win this match, and if that point's not setting the tone, I don't know what is. One point that I wanted to call out just briefly before that one is there's probably a point in this match, Djokovic hits a big ace, serving 2-3, 30-all. In my opinion, that pretty much keeps him in this match. Yeah, he ends up losing set number 4, but not until much later. If he gets broken there at 2-3 to go down 2-4, the way Federer was looking and the way Federer was serving through this set, Djokovic doesn't have a chance in set number 4.
That was a critical hold. That was one of those moments where you thought, is the momentum about to shift? Is Federer, as he so often does, going to put his foot on the neck and sort of take away from there? And then, Federer, as we mentioned, gets that ridiculous on-the-run backhand. He holds at love for 4-3. And then we had the commentator's jinx, right?
Federer's lost 1 point in 4 service games this set.
He has lost just 1 point on serve this entire set, and Westhoff can give you again the clip there. When Roger Federer needed a big first serve, he got it in this one.
Yeah, certainly. That's I've said it a million times, but that's sort of tried and true Federer, right? When he's in trouble, when his back's sort of against the wall, when he's cornered, I mean, that's what he can rely on. And look, you're playing against the best returner of all time, so at some point you're just probably going to get broken, right? Ultimately it happens here. I know this is one that we talked about a missed opportunity late in this set for Djokovic particularly, but man, I mean, he breaks Federer deep into this set, but Federer doesn't go away. Right, I mean, Djokovic is serving for this match, serving for the set in the 4th set at 5-4. Federer's not phased, right? I mean, even that first point, he's sending the signal. He's still out here grinding, and he's ripping to get back in the set. He's not giving it up to then set on what would have been the next day, because surely had this one gone Djokovic's way, they would have had to postpone and play the next set later. But Fed's right here in this match, and look, if you're ever going to, teach somebody about how mental the game of tennis is and how serving and breaking works, you point to this match. I mean, everything about this match is mental, particularly when you look at the timing of breaks. I mean, look, it happened from the very beginning with switching breaks in game number 1 and 2. It happened right here when Djokovic is serving for the match just after breaking, and Fed breaks him right back to stay in it, right? I mean, this is exceptional stuff right here, and Federer just truly showing why, even though, he's probably not the favorite going into this match, throughout the match, his level had been so high that he's like, so what, you're serving for the match? I'm still very much in this. Or serving for the set, I'm still very much in set number 4.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's a routine hold for 4-all. Federer Djokovic raced out to a love 30 lead. Federer, though, outgrinds him on that 15-30 point, then a couple of unreturnable serves for 43, but that 4-all game was a 5-deuce game, right? It took every ounce of Novak Djokovic's energy to win that game, and then they just play this absurd 22-shot rally. Djokovic on the break point. Just Djokovic goes Federer backhand, to the Federer backhand, to the Federer backhand, to the Federer backhand. Finally opens up the space he wants and goes down the line with the backhand on the winner. And again, the roar to get to break point, and then just the roar he lets out on the +1 ball miss from Federer for the 5-4 break. You can just see Novak Djokovic is like, oh yeah, I got this one. Like, you don't want to play a 5th set against me, Roger. And it looks like he does. But this is where the testament to Roger Federer's greatness comes in. This is why, and we'll talk about it as soon as we're done with the match, but I would argue this is the best I've ever seen him play, because he races out to a love 40 lead, right? And in that first one, Djokovic makes the mistake, and this is what happens when you go up a break. He gets a little bit cocky on that first point. He serves to the Federer forehand. They play an extended rally, but, Federer trips him up, and, he gets the prank. Love 30, he serves to the Federer backhand, and again, probably should have moved in on a +1 ball, but he hesitates, and then Federer unloads a one-hander down the line for love 40, and, couple of easy points then for Djokovic to get to 30-40, but Federer then, how many times have we seen this combo? Hits through a backhand return, goes inside out with a forehand, and then sets up an inside in for himself, and he just unloads on that inside in, and that's for 5-all, and it's just... I couldn't believe it, because it really, in that moment, rewatching, I was like, oh yeah, we're going 5, like perfect. Like, there's still 6 minutes left in this video. That must be because there's a 5th set coming that Djokovic is going to run away with. No, like, not only does Djokovic not get to get to set point in this game, but just Federer upped his level. And yeah, he was 10 years younger then, or 9 years younger, whatever it is, than he is now, but he was still almost 30. And, he just raised his level as the greatest ones do. And it was just phenomenal. And, going into that 4th set breaker, who did you feel like, after Djokovic got broken serving for the set, did you feel that was deflating? Or did you think it was still either or going into the breaker?
I still think it's either or, because look, with the momentum of this match, it had been so much of a back and forth, right? Somebody does something, the other one reciprocates it, and it's suddenly back to neutral, right? We saw that at the beginning of, honestly, a lot of these sets, right? People have chances, and even if they convert, boom, it's right back. That's happened literally since the first 2 games of the entire match. So, in this one, you still think that this is anybody's tiebreak. To me, though, if you're okay with me going into the tiebreak, I mean, the first point is so phenomenal, especially from the camp of Federer, because, I mean, look, if there was any time for Federer to be like, nah, this is my match and it's on my racket, it's point number 1 of the 4-set breaker. I mean, look, he has the huge serve, rips the forehands, then he controls it, takes it 1-0. I mean, that sets the tone for the tiebreak. He's like, look, I control this thing. You can run around and you have phenomenal defense. It's on me.
Yeah, again, in terms of the break, Federer once again gets out to an early mini break lead to love after, you're right, some of the forehands he hit, you're just like, oh, you're just like, how? And again, that's why I'm speechless. And then, a serve +1 from Djokovic, 2-1. But then the momentum shifts again. Missed approach shot from Federer for 2-all. He misses a return as well, so it's 3-2 now. Back on serve, Federer with 2 points to serve. There's a missed Fed's up 3-2 with Djokovic now serving 2. Then Fed misses a drop shot. So it's 3-all. Djokovic misses a +1 forehand. Misses a +1 forehand, though. So now Fed gets up the mini break 4-3. So again, another momentum shift. And that was the first moment where I was like, oh yeah, Roger Federer's going to win this match because, and I don't want to do it right now. I just went shirtless on overserved. But Federer, Djokovic takes his shirt, right, and he puts it over his head. And you can just tell he's like, ugh. Like, after all of this fighting, you're going to miss that +1 forehand. And he starts to get, frustrated. And then ace down the tee for Fed. Unreturnable serve out wide for Fed for 6-3. Then we got a net court to go Djokovic's way. And it's like, oh, maybe he is going to come back. And then he hits an ace out wide, the ball he had been setting up to keep Federer honest all this time on the do side for 6-5. Now, every CR Classic we discuss is going to have a few memorable moments, but let's talk about the most memorable moment of this one, the Roger Federer finger wag. Then we get to match point, 6-5. He goes ace-T, finger wag, ball skyrockets to the crowd, and just, come on! Again, full goosebumps for me right now. I will be upfront. Am I a Federer fan? I guess everyone's a Federer fan to an extent, but am I one of those diehard Federer slappies? No, of course not. And if you've listened to our podcast, you know that. But you can't not cheer for Roger Federer in that moment. Again, my whole body right now is just, it's the best.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an iconic moment, not only just in the men's game, but for Federer specifically. I mean, this one to me is, we always see him the classy guy, always saying the right thing. For some people, that's maybe what garners respect. To me, this makes me respect him so much more because I see this win and I see what you do and I'm like, yes, you are the face of this sport. That is right. Look, Westhoff, just go ahead. I apologize for my language here. I'm usually pretty good, but on this one, I can't. I mean, I've had my fair share of you wins in tennis. This is the biggest you win in tennis I've ever seen. I mean, the scream and the yell that he lets off while staring across the net. I mean, this guy wanted it so bad, and it showed. And the level of tennis matched, his desire to get this match done. And there was no more fitting into this. Ace down the tee, see ya. It's mine. This match is on my racket. Sorry.
It's just the first time we've ever seen Roger Federer just say, hey, I'm the man. You thought, 42-0, that's cute. And yeah, I blew 2 match points against you in that 2010 U.S. Open. But guess what? I know this loss hurts you way more than that loss hurt me. And I'm not saying there's any personal vitriol because I'm not going to project that onto them. And, it was fascinating to see there after the match exchange, Djokovic just kind of patting him on the chest. He's like, way to go. You were just too good today. And if I'm Djokovic, I'm like, you f***ing tree. Tree a little harder next time, Roger, because I'm not saying he treed. Roger Federer doesn't tree. He's just that good. But you're right. I mean, it's literally, and again, I'm going to do this for the camera. He just goes, no, Novak. And that finger wag, it was just so disrespectful. And you can just tell he's like, I lost to him 4 times or 3 times, whatever, on hard courts already this year. And this guy's supposed to be all this and all that. He's the second coming, whatever. He's the next generation. And it's literally just like, no. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, but this is in every top 10 moments of the 21st century tennis-wise. It's just, how can it not be? The finger wag, it's like, I'm the greatest. And at that point, he had already passed Pete Sampras's mark. And, if Djokovic passes him, maybe this match fades a little bit into history. But until that moment, happens, this finger wag is, I'm the greatest. And for someone who presents himself as this humble, multicultural, multilingual, just, classy man, it's just disrespectful, and it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. And look, let's not say you can't beat both, because you get off the court, you're supposed to be that competitor on that court. It's just too good. No, it's an iconic moment. And, regardless of whatever happens, if Djokovic does pass him in the end, I think he will. I don't necessarily think that makes this, less iconic, because at the time, I mean, this is just something special.
So now that we've talked about the match, let's talk about our big takeaways after watching it. We talked about it before. If you think these guys are better now, go watch the YouTube highlights. XXS Tennis Channel has some highlights for you that, again, beg to differ because these guys were just so exceptional. The other thing, the physicality, it's off the chart, and we talk about it all the time on our Mini Break podcast. The game has gotten more and more physical. We see so many guys who are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" nowadays because you almost have to have a stroke that big or some sort of weapon or be that physically capable just because of the way that the game is now played. But these guys are the peak. This is tennis at its finest. It will never get, it may get better, but for the foreseeable future, this is as good as it gets. I mean, these are two guys at the peak of their power.
Yeah, I mean, look, people were definitely calling for Djokovic to win this one. And, people who are backing Djokovic, how can you blame them? I mean, like you mentioned, the results he was putting up, he had looked so good. Not only his strokes, and we know his prowess on the hard court, but the ability for him to translate this to the clay, I mean, this was dangerous, not only for the guys he was battling out, but the incumbents of Nadal and Federer. I mean, this guy had established himself at the top of the game. Now we're on the clay, and I'm beating Nadal, the king of clay. You guys are in trouble. And so, yeah, everybody was hyped on Djokovic, and, rightfully so. I mean, look, he brought so much into this match, and I'm sure we're going to get into it so much, but I'm getting excited and wanted to get ahead of myself because he looked so good leading up to this, and even in this match, he looked so good.
The biggest stages, the biggest moments, he always brought his A game. That's Roger Federer's legacy. That's why he's been so good for so long. That's why his career has extended past any of the greats who came before him. And of course, modern technology plays a role in that as well. And this match is a reminder of just all of the tools he has at his disposal. And with all of the implications that came out of this one, it's only fitting that we end today's CR Classic with a segment we're calling The Aftermath. Yeah, Rafa goes on to win the title, and I don't think that shocks anyone. It's so difficult to maintain that level back-to-back. Rafa just so perfectly built to beat Federer on clay, lefty, into the one-handed backhand, the heavy spin. He wins that match 7-5, 7-6, 5-7, 6-1. So Rafa comfortably cruises in. What's so fascinating is, for Djokovic, this was just a blip, right? He goes on to reach number one on July 4th for the first time in his career. In the 2011 season, 10-1 against Nadal and Federer. That one loss is this match. He wins Wimbledon. He wins the U.S. Open to capture 3 of 4 majors for the first time in his career. He wins what was a then record, and by the way, he ends up breaking this record, but 5 Masters events that season. He goes 6-0 against Rafa in finals. So, one of the what-ifs is, if Djokovic wins this match, does he go on to win the French Open in 2011? Do we see this breaking of the fever where maybe Rafa loses a little bit of confidence on the clay? Maybe Djokovic is able to sneak out 1 or 2 more clay court, Roland Garros's, 1 more clay court Roland Garros's, 1 or 2 more French Open titles over the course of his career. And what's even more fascinating is, I don't want to say the tailspin because he was still pretty good, but for Federer, he loses to Tsonga at Wimbledon after going up 2-0 for the first time in his career, blowing that sort of lead. That U.S. Open, certainly Djokovic still felt a little animosity. He once again fights off 2 match points to beat Federer for the second straight year. And again, it's the first season since 2002 that Federer goes without a slam. It's fascinating. You look at the aftermath of that, Jamie. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's certainly possible. Look, we love to play the what-if game. And in this one, you can certainly make the case that Djokovic was playing at the level, high enough to win this. Sure, Nadal ends up beating Fed in 4 at this one. But, I don't think anybody is going to say that Djokovic wouldn't have had at least a decent shot to win this match against Nadal. Because, look, who could question him? Especially if he had come through a Federer who was playing this well. That's got to be scary, even for Nadal, king of clay, so comfortable at the French Open. Definitely a realistic possibility. It's interesting you mentioned sort of call it a tailspin, or just what happens to Federer in the rest of the year. It is interesting. And, hopefully that doesn't make you sort of take anything away from his performance in this match. Because, you want to look back on it fondly and just say, take this match for what it was. Because at this point in time, at this moment on this day, Federer was just in a phenomenal spot. And so that's how it was, regardless of what happened after, regardless of any blown, leads after that at other big time tournaments. This is what it was, and with one of the most iconic matches that I can remember.
Yeah, it was just nuts, right? And again, that's the takeaway. I guess we never really went through what the final score was, but Federer in this match, again, knocks off Novak Djokovic 7-6, 7-5 in that breaker, 6-3, 3-6, 7-6, 7-5 in the breaker. And the reason we started with this is because, in my opinion, and this is the thought I'll leave you on, and it's really hard to say because there's so many matches over the careers, and, there might actually be like a random third round in 2007 where he just played out of his mind and he just annihilated some poor soul. But on a big stage, in a big moment, even though this wasn't a Grand Slam final, this is the best I've ever seen Roger Federer play.
It's certainly up there. Look, you can point to other times much earlier in the 2000s, particularly on grass, and say that maybe there were some better performances. But look, for this time frame, and especially given the scenario with how well Djokovic was doing, the fact that he was looking truthfully unstoppable. The guy was actually undefeated, and that Fed was able to step in and win this match. Yeah, this is top tier Federer, and you're going to have a hard time finding, a lot of other performances that sort of eclipse this one.
It was a sensational match. And again, it's not as though Novak Djokovic goes on to a poor year. He wins the next two slams. He goes 70-6 overall. 2011 was his first signature season. Really, that and 2015 are the two best seasons Novak Djokovic has ever played, and they might be the two best individual seasons ever. So the fact that Federer was able to beat him speaks to, again, his ability to rise to the moment, his ability, just the way he played in this match. And so I feel like we've hit everything. Any final thoughts in this one, Jamie, before we wrap this bad boy up?
I think we got it. Just excited for our next classic.
We hope you enjoyed our first CR Classic, breaking down that amazing 2011 semifinal where Roger Federer managed to knock off an undefeated Novak Djokovic. This is the first in a long-form series that we plan on continuing at Cracked Racquets, even when action returns to us during this 2020 season. There have been so many great matches over the years, so why not continue this? Why not allow super producer Daniel Westoff to continue to flex his muscles on our YouTube channel? And of course, if you're watching this video, that means you're on YouTube and you have no excuse to take that. You watched a 1 hour, 20-minute video. So if you're willing to do that, you can take the 30 seconds it is to click right below you, right here, click on that Cracked Racquets channel, go up and click on subscribe. It's right next to the title name on that page. And, that way you're not going to miss any of the action. Super producer Westoff up to so much fun stuff. We also, as I mentioned at the top, just got out Overserved, our second episode, looking at all of the unintentional comedy, all of the fun things, the TikTok recreations, the Vines, the GIFs. See, that shows you how old I am. The Vines. I feel like that's a way throwback. It was Vine, right, Westoff? It was Vine. Leave that in. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed this series. Go subscribe to YouTube so you won't miss any of the action. Again, listen, like, rate, subscribe, review to all of our podcasts as well. But for now, you've been watching the first edition of CR Classics.